Welcome to the Anxious Child Podcast, the podcast that helps you best work with anxious kids and teens. Now, here's your host, Stephen Quinlan.
Welcome to the Anxious Child Podcast. My name's Stephen Quinlan, and I'm a psychotherapist in private practice. I specialize in working with anxiety, and in my practice, a good majority of my clients are anxious kids and teens. I've been a therapist for over 20 years now. I've integrated a lot of different things into my work. Probably one of my favorites is lying on my feet right now, that being my therapy dog, Hazel. Hopefully she doesn't start snoring. But I wanted to do an introduction about the show and tell you a little bit about why I decided to do it in the first place. The idea for doing a podcast has been rummaging around in my brain for some time now. It's such a great way to impart information to a large audience, and I feel like there's so much need around helping kids and teens manage their anxiety that it all seemed to make sense. That being said, I struggled a bit with how to get all that across. I spent a lot of time agonizing over relatively trivial things such as just what to name the podcast. Don't get me started on that. But I kept coming back to this idea of not only trying to impart the best possible information to the most people who are trying to work with anxious kids and teens, but moreover, thought of creating a community. Back when I was in graduate school, I majored in group work, and I vividly recall being in New York City and working for the Red Cross, facilitating housing groups. I was way out of my element as a young kid from Colorado with almost no experience trying to help mostly single women with children in housing shelters navigate the New York City housing system. Obviously, I struggled a lot with imposter syndrome and feeling like I had nothing to offer these people or that I would ever be able to connect with them across things such as race, gender, and socioeconomic lines that were so vastly different from my own experience. But I was really surprised by how much easier it was than I thought to connect with them. I was even more surprised to find out that I actually had something to offer just by having some information and creating a space for them to not only receive it, but also to help each other process their difficulties. I've never forgotten that, and I've always felt like there's a way for me to try to help more people on a larger scale outside of just my current private practice. I was in a session just with somebody just the other day and talking about the importance of connection with other human beings and just how helpful it can be for so many things from depression to anxiety to addiction. And during the pandemic, I think this has become even more clear to me, and I think probably to many other people as well. I was out on a run this morning, and I was on a road near my house that I like to go down because there's hardly ever any traffic on it, and it's just a nice straight road and a pretty out-of-the-way woodsy area. And as I was going along, two cars passed me and both moved over to the other side of the road for me. So I acknowledged this with the customary wave, and of course they both waved back. It's certainly not something that's unusual, but I think because I was thinking so much about connection, something about it struck me. Even these people who have no idea who I am, and I don't know who they are, and they're going by me in 30 miles an hour in a vehicle where they're completely walled off from me, I still felt a nice little lift from something as simple as them courteously moving aside and us both waving to each other. I've also had the opposite happen where someone was going by a few days ago and hadn't moved over at all, and I caught myself thinking, what a jerk. But because I've also been trying to send as many people loving kindness as I can, I caught myself. I smiled a little bit, and then I thought, I hope that person is doing okay. There's so much that we aren't aware of when we come into contact with other people. They could have been rushing to the hospital or something. I don't know. But I think if we start from a fundamental place of everyone is doing their best with what they have, it's easier to have compassion and understanding for others. I'm really excited to have my friend Sadayu from the Portsmouth Buddhist Center on one of our upcoming episodes, as I think he's much better at articulating some of this than I am. But so much of what I try to do in therapy is to try and create a non-judgmental space and have unconditional positive regard for everyone who comes into it. My hope for this podcast is to try and create a community with that same kind of feel to it, in addition to arming parents and professionals with the most up-to-date research and information around how to best work with anxiety. So going back to my days as a wide-eyed, green 20-something in the middle of New York City, I could feel some of those same feelings of imposter syndrome creeping in as I went about trying to create the podcast. Who's going to listen to this? What are you even doing? Does my voice really sound like that? You can't possibly create a community like that on any sort of scale. But already, as I've started to put the word out on the website and social media, I've got such amazing feedback before I've even launched an episode. It's hard to put yourself out there, but people respond to it when you do. It's things like this that let me know I'm going in the right direction. I've also been pleasantly surprised at the caliber and variation of guests that I've been able to get for the first season. People's willingness to put aside some of their precious time to help me out and ultimately to help other people out is really incredible. So here we go. It's been quite a ride already so far, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. You'll probably hear me say this on many of the episodes, but I also really want to listen and to be in touch with who's listening. So if you have a comment or some feedback for me, I'd love to hear it. You can email me at the email address on the show notes, or you can message me on Instagram, The Anxious Child Podcast, and I'll do my best to try and get back to everyone. Please spread the word. Let's try to get this out to as many people as possible and whoever needs to hear it. Obviously, I'd love if you want to subscribe to the show and leave me a review. That helps me build this up from scratch. It really feels like a grassroots movement, but I think that it's really exciting. So I hope you enjoy the podcast. Be in touch and take care.
This podcast is not intended as medical or psychological treatment. In no way should it replace treatment from a mental health professional.